What could an honest man say aside from the fact that he just put a random plastic bag in the trash? He can say nothing. And so that is what one discovers in the silence of honesty, that there's nothing to say but everything to be. When I at least speak about consciousness, I recognize that that is a playful act which I am doing with myself. So in other words, I recognize who I am before I speak. And in that silence, you're really no one, but a moment that is passing. And so the observance of this passage is simply what every passage in a holy book has been trying to say. Because once you observe existence, you recognize that the nature of your thought, the way you were thinking about everything, was actually like perhaps your body, but when you were, let's say, 5 years younger or something like that. You see that the systems of thought you have require your act of observance through a sense of clarity, and that means you are letting, not in a sense letting go. You're not doing anything. You're simply in a very meditative state or in a very self-aware state, forgetting your problems by, in a sense, observing all that you remember about them. When one confronts the nature of mind and the nature of thought, one cannot touch anything, because the minute you do, you have created a sense of you that needs to do something. When your sense of self is in a state of need, it is always needing it based on circumstance, and hence external over internal means that you're fighting when you don't need to. So look at how you're looking at things and immediately see that regardless of any voice you can hear, nature communicates. There is an experience that I've heard many people say about shamans and rishis and in general, these people, and I really resonate with it because I understand it. And you see the shaman, or the person who was a seer in a sense, he had simple stuff. For example, he had a bunch of rocks, or he went and he just looked at something and the vision came to him. You see, great sight is great, and it comes to you simply because the winds that blow are showing you that there are greater flows. When you recognize that you're not alone because you are, in a sense, a collective being, you recognize that your individuality always requires your most beautiful attention. And so it's a natural thing. So don't think that life is not caring for you. Life has brought you, and it wants you to be alive. But you also need to become aware why you need to or want to be alive. And see if it's shaped or if it's simply to be an expression. In other words, after you're that guy who's done every achievement possible, every task, you'll see after you've done everything this world can ask of man, the only thing to do is to sit down and be still and experience man through his lack of action. Because we are all given action mans and action figures. But we realize that the freedom is actually in the lack of action. So we need lack of action figures. I guess that's something for toy companies to think about. To continue. The shaman could, with a few rocks, or could with a natural walk, simply see as something that would happen in the future. Many people think seers are looking in the future. They're not. Seers are aware of a vision that knows the future. So what that is that you as a human form get a certainty that immediately translates into something. And so that certainty comes from an opening of your attention. So many shamans knew that the visions were coming because it was simply their time, and they would allow the moment to communicate to them. A lot of people don't allow the moment to communicate in a sense simply because they think they are the moment. So you will see this phenomenon of all these people going into now, recognizing now that we're in this presence, creativity needs to rise. And so the shaman would simply see that life would put him in a moment where he would look at a few objects and completely know exactly with detail certain potential things happening. Because it's a fractal sense of knowing, and everyone has this. It has come to me. And what that means is that I have suddenly randomly looked at a sunset and intense emotions have awakened. As if what I was seeing was not any sight or vision or shape, but an absorption into pure just blissful being. It's like blissful doesn't even do justice because it's not based on anything, so you can't define it. So it's a sense of being that is just beautiful in its omniscience. Now, to be a seer, guys, I have thought about talking about this, and to be honest, I'm going to talk about it in a sense to tell everyone to stop talking about it. You actually don't talk about it because the interest of the seer has found him before he begins. And so if you are to be a seer, you never know that you're a seer because when it comes to you, it comes in revelation, it comes in its own time. What the patient man sees when they say patience is a virtue is that the human possibility through its confrontation of its impossibility is simply a moment of existence. The greatest ideas known to man were moments of existence. And so we see that what is very key to have when it comes to any door is an ability to no longer be behind the door. When you become aware, you no longer are bothered, in my view, that when you become, I guess in a sense, a lot of people call it enlightened, but what I believe what that means is that when you have gone in a state of being where you see that your excitement has been, it's as if, how do I say it, you're not renouncing life because you think it's bad, you're renouncing life because it's so good and you're absorbed in it completely. And in a sense, when I say renounce life, that could be very confusing, but what that really means is that back in the day, guys, a lot of these monks and these yogis, they just simply lived very simply, and so they didn't do a lot of earthly things, like they didn't go to parties and, you know, and do certain social things. They were in a sense wild men of their time, totally without nothing. So in other words, let's say if the government was looking at the people in the society back in the day, they would see certain range of people. Okay, and these people trust the government. They agree with it. These people don't agree with it and are planning different political regimes. These people don't even believe that they're here. Certain group of people, and so they would see that's insane. But they would not understand that the sense of here is coming from who? And so greedy men have forgotten why there is a man in the first place to even be greedy. And so you need to let existential questions to come in front of you and for you to sit down with them and have a chat. Have a cup of tea. Just simply be in the presence of your greatest ideas. Be in the presence of the craziest ideas. Be in the presence of your worst idea, your best idea, and in a sense, know that your sense of loneliness is simply giving you an ability to get a greater value when you are simply reunited with that moment you're supposed to be in. Which beautifully, isn't it? And so, guys, there have been many times where you see your eyes are present in a greater view. And the seer or the shaman would throw perhaps his items or simply just look at something and simply just walk in a certain way, some natural thing, and simply resonate at a level where it's as if his knowing is present through the greater knowing of a being. So similar to if you were present and looking at ants, and I'm saying this very playfully, right, and gracefully. When you are looking at ants, you see that ants are smaller than you. They don't even know you're here, but as you are looking at them, you see these ants moving, and their distances, their pathways, how they're moving. And you see that if the ant could somehow, if it was lost or it didn't have a sense of coordination for some reason based on this conversation, you would see that you as a being, imagine the ant suddenly naturally being able to have your gaze, and so your sense of view and knowing is communicated in the ant, so the ant suddenly knows everything without even having done something, right? You see, when you look at the subtlety of where knowing comes from, there is a sense of life which you cannot avoid, and it is simply a flow. You will see it as a natural phenomenon. What that means is it is so unexpected. It is so surprising. It is insanely beautiful and chaotically harmonious. Your mind is your immediate space of exploration. And so those people who become aware of their thoughts realize that they will eventually be found in a space where they are no longer bothered by thought, but are constantly in an existential experience where it's as if you have just stepped out of a dark room. You simply just know that feeling, you know it. And the value of your life will open to you as it always has been. It's not, a lot of people think positive imagery is going to save us. No, positive imagery is going to show you, the more intense positive imagery you have, the more intense you're being able to confront negative imagery. And it's not about, juggling things around. It's in a sense about you recognizing that the depth of your gaze is infinite in the sense that what your potential is infinite. And so in this moment of creation, you realize there's never a reason to limit yourself in shapes which you feel you cannot change. You will see that as that ant gets the knowing, the other ants might be like, whoa, how did you get this knowing? And the ant could never explain it, but to say it was perhaps, what many of our other religious stories and all this context are. You see, the reason, guys, they say to be polite, I'm going to say there's one type of politeness, let's say, which is, for example, I can't believe I'm talking about politeness, what it is. I mean, it's really, really, really great in a way, actually. But to continue, Okay, so there's two types of politeness. There's the one where, you hold the door open for, the other person at the back. Or, there's another type of politeness that is existential. It is a politeness to yourself where you just stop yourself from being stressed or agitated or always so trying to make it and do it and get it and do it. It's not that you shouldn't have that, but just bring yourself to a sense of ease to maintain an equilibrium. So what that means is that as much as you try to be hard, don't avoid the soft, because then you put yourself in a sense where you feel you've never experienced the soft. And so that moment perhaps where you're in the eyes of the man who walked across Niagara Falls on a rope, we could see that regardless of the performance, there was a beauty in observing such a moment. And so existential politeness becomes a self-awareness where you suddenly don't just wake up to who you are, you wake up to what existence and its expression is presenting to you. To continue, you see this existential politeness being an expression of allowance. So you see you as a being, you allow things. So what that means is if I am in front of a place where two people are fighting, as an aware being of what I find fighting is doing, I immediately stop it. So what that means is that existential politeness becomes a sense of care, not just for you, not just for other people, but for life and all its forms. So you will see, you will suddenly become mindful is because you're trying to allow your moment of being to express to its fullest. And so your experience is simply the bliss of its observance. Let yourself communicate in silence. And so recognize that when your mouth does not speak, what worlds entertain you? What thoughts come to you? My friends, I want to share with you a quote written by a very, in a sense, spiritual Sufi poet. And so he says, "This being human is a guest house. Every morning is a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Treat each guest honorably. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond." Rumi. And so, my friends, I would like to tell you that this is very true, and you see that the mindful man realizes that the moment is a guest house. And so, once your experience and your intelligence remembers itself, it sees that it could have never forgotten itself. Because there is a such care in existence. Existence cares for itself. That's why it's here. And so if your illusions are creating a harsh world where your actions are not helping the planet, you do not judge yourself, because we do not walk in those fields, in those muddy fields, but you recognize that efficient action means you judging your next step based on what is clearly in front of you. And what is clearly in front of you is not TV. It is not music, careers, money, fame. No, it is not even a moment, being alone. It is not even with words and speeches. It is not even in shape. And when you reach these boundaries where you think madness has come to your door, remember the guest house. Because your greatest teachers for the greatest teachers can never teach more. You will recognize the intensity of your immediate presence regardless of your hologram, and your hologram will open and your state of consciousness will activate itself based on its ability. Just as you see how some people are talented, some people have these patterns, different people have different makeups of design which come from, let's say for now, a formless attention that initiate form. What we think is a hologram and what many people have in a sense coded as code, you see that just as we are present here in a certain range of experience, there is a relevance when one item is present in a separate dimension. So what that means is that distance cannot exist. You will see that some of the most wisest beings never said anything. As you remember yourself, you will really see that you're a being with infinite nature.
Your sense of awareness and self-awareness can, in a sense, remind you by letting you allow yourself to see. Be playful and enjoy everything happens. Do not worry about who comes in the guest house. For regardless, the host of this world is never bothered. Much blessings and namaste.